What's up, everybody? What's up? Is everybody getting creamed by their tri yet? There's a lot of tri-3s in here. How are you non-tri-3s doing? You guys have a bunch of tests and stuff already? Going well? Is anybody in neuro in here? I wonder what they're going over. We should try to line it up with some of their stuff. I had a couple really good questions. People are finding me. If you guys don't have a manual yet, see Tyler about getting a manual, because I have a lot of people finding me in the library and other places and stopping me and asking me questions about stuff we're doing. It's really cool. I know Parker asked a really good question after club last time. I'm going to ask it. I want you guys to think about it, and then it'll be answered later on today. I want to answer it too soon. But he asked, okay, if the strongest adjustments are midline, and the strongest adjustments are cervical midline, so a really strong adjustment would be, upper cervical. Why would you even bother adjusting an extremity if it's not even as strong? What do you guys think? Layla, what do you think?
Sometimes you might need that much stimulation. You might need a little bit less.
Okay, I like that answer. Tyler, what do you think?
I agree. Metabolic threshold, but also if you want to get more specific with like a lateral activation of the cortex, if you're doing an extremity, it's going to allow you to be a little bit more specific to the area of the brain that you want to activate.
Okay, I like it. Bryce, what do you think?
I think just generally you usually want to start with the most least invasive ways to fix someone before you, jump to sawing something off, or in chiropractic terms, jump straight to the cervicals. Unless you know your patient can definitely handle it.
They're all good answers. Not quite what I was looking for, but they're all right. It's all good. It's more specificity and all that kind of stuff. Anybody that hasn't been, I know a lot of you guys are new to Neuro Club. Let's try it. Anybody that is new still want to take a whack at it? What do they think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Oh, well, you don't answer it. We kind of talked about it.
I kind of agree with all that.
Okay. Okay, cool. Cool. Well, we'll answer it at some point today. All right, so giving you guys a little review, we were talking about how, when we adjust somebody, it goes, you have a bombardment of neural activation from the muscle spindles and Golgi tendons, it goes up. We got a couple different areas. Back here is the dorsal columns, posterior part of the spinal cord. It breaks up into, right here is the lower part, so your legs and lumbar coming in right here in the middle. It kind of looks like, if you flip this upside down, it looks like a really baggy sweater. Like the arms of the sweater are out here, and this is like the rest, like where the legs would go. That's how I remember it. The legs are in the middle, the arms go out right here, and this is where the head would be. So you got the thoracic and cervical. There's also a place called, about right here, that also handles unconscious proprioception. Does anybody know what that's called? It's in lamina 7. It's called Clark's column. So Clark's column is a really big deal when we adjust people. It comes up right through here. It ends up going straight into the spinocerebellar tract, which will come up and, well, we don't have the cerebellum on here, but it would be right here. So it'll go straight up into that cerebellum. Cerebellum will go straight up into the opposite side cortex. You also have in the dorsal columns, it'll come straight up, and it'll stop in the medulla. It'll decussate over into the medial lemniscal pathway into the opposite side cortex as well. So that's a lot of big words, and I don't really care about that. But the point I'm trying to make is, why do you guys think it decussates in the medulla first? Back here. What do you guys know that's in the pons of the medulla? It doesn't have to be specific, just what is it normally for?
Vital functions.
Okay, like autonomics.
Yeah.
Right? Breathing, heart rate, autonomic function. So the part of your brain, the part of your nervous system that has to do with motor, the nerves are, all right, so let me rephrase that. The motor nerves and the autonomic nerves, to let's say the bicep, the nerves that control the bicep and then the nerves that control the blood flow to the bicep were born at the same time. And they matured at the same time, so whenever that motor nerve fires, that autonomic nerve fires to vasodilate whatever's moving to create oxygen to that, okay? So they go to the same spot because your brain wants to know whatever's moving, we need to send blood flow to it. So when you see people that get adjusted with too much input, too strong of an adjustment, where they get that high feeling, or they get, nauseous, or if they end up throwing up, if they're dizzy or whatever, it's because you just crashed their medulla, and now their autonomics are failing, and it takes a while for that autonomic to come back up, to regulate again. to be normal. Does that make sense? Okay, so these are just some of the questions that I was being asked. I want to kind of go back over because it's kind of important to know, that when we talk about metabolic threshold, we don't want to blow people's autonomics on the way to stimulating their brain to make them healthier. That's kind of counterproductive, right? Okay, cool. All right, so we're talking about cerebellum today. What does it do? We're talking about motor coordination. We're talking about learning motor skills. I know Dr. Shrek came into town and he was talking about the cerebellum is something that once you actually learn a motor skill, then the cerebellum takes over and it's the opposite. So the cerebellum is what creates that motor control, and that motor pattern sends it up to the cortex, and the cortex goes, cool, now I've got a game plan, I've got the blueprint for what we're about to do, and it sends it down. Okay? I had a really cool video, and this room sucks in internet, so I can't play it, but it also has a lot to do with muscle tone and posture. We're going to go over all that in a second. Smooth muscle contractions, which has a lot to do with autonomics too. And we're about to go over this. This is really important. Who knows what VOR is? Layla, what's VOR? So what does it mean? If you're going to test VOR on me, what would you do?
It's like basically the conjunction of the vestibular system and then like your nervous function, like how people are able to perceive things that we see, and then how that affects like the nervous system or where you're at.
Perfect.
Stuff like that.
So vestibulo-ocular response. If I'm looking at Demetria in the back, and I'm trying to keep my eyes fixated on her, and I turn my head, there's no nerves that, well, I'm not even going to say that and confuse you guys. The vestibular system says, hey, your head's turning left, but you're trying to keep your eyes on the target. You need to fire your eyes to the right at an equal and opposite speed, right? So opposite direction, equal speed to stay on a target. So a lot of that's cerebellar too. So we'll look at that a lot, and we'll teach you guys how to look at that today. I'm just trying to give you guys an overview really quick. So proprioception, people talk about proprioception a lot. I just wanted to verify, I wanted to define it as the unconscious perception, because some people think there's a conscious level of what we're doing and unconscious, and a lot of what the cerebellum does is unconscious. So when we're talking about movement patterns and all that stuff, that's going to come back later on. What do you guys think about muscle memory? Is it real? Where are my trainers at? What do you think?
It's a schema.
Okay. Explain it.
Your muscles don't have memory. It's a motor program that your cerebellum stores.
Cool. Ever since I heard Tim Tebow say that, I was a big Tim Tebow fan. Bobby's not in here. And he's like, I just do a lot of muscle memory stuff, and all my trainers talk about muscle memory, and I'm like, who's training you? So when we talk about muscle memory, everybody knows what we're talking about when you say muscle memory. The more you do whatever you're doing, the better you get at it, right? It's not muscle memory, it's just you're improving that coordination through the cerebellum. I want to come back to that.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
I just want to say, when I was looking at a lot of the research for this section, a lot has changed in the past couple decades. We kind of had, before that, we had somewhat of a static model of what the cerebellum does, posture and balance, and coordination, motor coordination, and that kind of stuff. Well, now as we learn more about how it's interconnected with the basal ganglia, the motor cortex, all these things, our concept of what the cerebellum does has expanded a lot, going into like developing, cognitive abilities, learning, memory recall, and all that thing. So it's complicated, but we're learning a lot about it.
There's actually, you can do some reading on something called cerebellar cognitive affective syndrome.
Talk really loud, Nick.
The cerebellar cognitive affective syndrome, or disorders, and basically it's talking about how the cerebellum is linked to executive functioning and all kinds of other stuff like that. So you can see depression and poor choices and stuff like that all roots back to a cerebellar dysfunction as well.
So it just doesn't coordinate movement, it coordinates motor response, and that can be thoughts, it could be emotions, it could be executive functions, like what things are the most important in your life, that kind of thought process. You can have uncoordinated thoughts too. So if you have people, you see people all the time that make like really weird decisions and have really weird priorities, and like some people look at that, or if you look at all that. Here's a better question. How would a patient come in and describe to you without saying, like, they're not going to come in and say, like, hey, I've got a cerebellar disorder. What would they say? What would you start looking at the, like, I know what I'm going to check in my exam. Like, what would you guys think?
Clumsy.
Acting like that you're wrong.
Bump into stuff. Yeah, what else?
Doing
Or
things I
falling
normally
down.
do, maybe, like things like you're talking about, yeah, just kind of.
Impulsive, sure. What about, do you think they can drink you under the table, or do you think they're really cheap date drinking?
Cheap date.
Why?
It's already taxed.
Because Purkinje system is very, very sensitive to.
What's the
alcohol.
Purkinje system, Nick?
It's the cells that's in your cerebellar cortex, but the Purkinje cells there basically execute cerebellar function, and their metabolic demand is very high. They're also very susceptible to alcohol. It kills them.
So it's pretty cool. Like if you get drunk and you get the spins, you spin towards your weak cerebellum. Yeah, I know. Like all so whenever one takes a dump, the fastest you're going to perceive, and that's because that same side cerebellum is going to have input with that vestibular nuclei too. So just next time you guys this weekend, whatever. I want to talk about this. This is for what Parker asked. This is like the price of admission today. Like why you guys are here. So why would you guys adjust an extremity when all you could do is just adjust the spine? So Tyler, can I borrow you for all right, we're gonna pretend Tyler, we dressed him. We took him out of the cadaver lab. Tyler's dead. Sorry. So imagine him as a cadaver in the lab, right? And imagine we somehow propped him up and got him on his 2 feet, and I lifted his arm like this, and then I let go. Which way would he fall down? Huh?
Knee or the arm?
Which is him. Like which way? So if I had him like this, and I put more weight on this side, which way would he fall?
That side.
This way. Does anybody want to argue that? Am I making sense so far? That's kind of like an oversimplified point. This is what I'm about to say. If I move this arm, so Tyler's back, he's alive, Walking Dead. So Ebola, yeah. So if he raises his right arm, what's the first muscle that fired on Tyler? If we hooked up and we put a needle EMG in every muscle in his body, which one would fire first?
Paraspinals. Multipity.
The opposite side.
What?
Of the opposite side.
Why?
Because you've got to counteract the
It's
balance.
axial.
It's the proprioception of your back.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Thank you, Todd. So in order to move a proximal joint or a proximal limb or whatever, you have to fire your extensors in your legs, you have to fire all the extensors in your back and the stabilizers in your back. So why in the world would we need to adjust extremities? Let's say, so hold on to that. That's important. So there's 4 different nuclei in the cerebellum. And then it's fat guys eat donuts. So the F, and this is medial to lateral. So F stands for fastigium. That's this little dude right here. Then there's the emboliform and the globus, which combine make the interposed nuclei. And then there's the dentate out here. The dentate's huge. So the dentate is responsible. This is your clumsy people right here when this goes bad. This is your, if it's like how I perceive myself in my surroundings. If I think that this is actually closer or further away, this is like you trying to figure out how fast something is coming towards you or away. This is like, for an athlete, if you have to have a decent dentate to figure out, okay, I've got this defender coming, I've got this ball coming, I'm going to triangulate how fast do I need to speed up to that ball, do I need to slow down, do I need to make a cut, whatever. That's dentate, that's spatial awareness. You got your interposed right here, which the emboliform is more elbow and knee. The globus is more shoulder and hip, and that has a really, really good communication with your red nuclei, which control your shoulders and hip as well. We'll get to that. That's not, if that went over your head, that's cool. We're going to come back to it. And then your fastigium is midline. So if you guys adjust the spine, it's going fastigium, right? But here's the deal. You can't fire your interposed nuclei without firing your fastigium. Does that make sense? Because I can't fire my shoulder to raise my arm unless I fire midline first to stabilize me. Okay? So let's say you guys need a little boost. Let's say you guys are adjusting spine, and it's not clearing. You can try to do extremities because the extremity adjustment has to go midline too. Does that make sense? That's huge. So did that answer your question? Does that kind of make sense if you guys, for those that haven't heard that before?
said the appendicular has to go midline, but what if you just axial? Is that also the midline? Or?
Not necessarily. If you do that, it could change it through biomechanics. So let's say you do fire midline, you stabilize midline, it might affect your compensatory movement in your limbs, but not necessarily a direct neural input that way. It's more like orthopedic, not neurological. Does that make sense?
But tell them too, like what you're telling me about one firing into the other, like the lateral.
So these,
yeah.
all of these right here,
Yeah.
have to fire here.
Yeah.
And this right here, so there's the cortex. This is all your sensory stuff on the outside. The sensory stuff fire into the deep nuclei, and then they go up into the pons, up into the mesencephalon, up into the cortex. So if you fire here, you're gonna fire midline, and midline is gonna, and that that vestigium right there is gonna help stabilize the rest of the spine.
Guys, also too, when you're looking at cerebellum, remember in the cortex we got those things called homunculus, which is like a map of our body. There's maps of our body in the cerebellum as well, and that's kind of what he's telling you right now. So if you have trouble getting it, draw a little guy out or a little girl on the cerebellum, so then it makes more sense to you. Say, oh, okay, yeah, this nucleus is more the arms, or this part of the cerebellum is more the arms, more the legs. That way you can, get a little better in your head.
Layla, come right real quick. So that's what I was about to say too. So in your cortex, you've got one major map. Can I get you to lay down face up for me? You got one major map that goes over where you know everything is. So if I touch you on your elbow, that part where your elbow is in your parietal lobe goes ding, like something's going on in our parietal lobe. Your cerebellum is in charge of coordinating complicated movements. So they have maps in your cerebellum that, let's say, like, imagine Layla's laying down like this, and then another version of Layla is laying down like this and like this and like this. So they're like layered differently so that you can fire one column up and hit her elbow and this knee and this hip and this shoulder, so you can do stuff like that. Does that make sense? It has different maps layered on top of it, so you can do different stuff, so you can fire different muscles at the same time that give you coordinated movement. So if I'm trying to do something like, if I want to go in and adjust her elbow or something like that, I do a radial head on her, or I do a complicated movement over here, I can also look at that and say, okay, well, I also want to go and look at this knee. And that'll give you other neural stimulation to that cortex. You can do stuff like that. I can also do stimulation where if there's stroke patients that come in all the time where I can't get them to do shoulder flexion. So I'll have them do hip flexion. And then you give them stimulator. Then you can do an activator. Then you can do some eye movements. Then you can do something else which will power to that shoulder. Does that make sense? Did I lose anybody?
You do it while they're flexing?
Yep. You fire them at the same time. So they come in, you say, okay, I want you to raise your left shoulder. And it's like, nothing. And you say, okay, I want you to go put your hip in flexion. You're not going to tell it. I mean, you're going to say it simpler for them, but you put them here, or you get them to do this. And then it goes up. So you can get them to turn their head towards, let's say I'm working on shoulder flexion. Their shoulder's not going up. You can put their head towards the shoulder. Their eyes will go the opposite direction, will go right. That shoulder will come up and this hip will go up. So you're getting other muscles to help fire into the part that's controlling this shoulder flexion. And so that shoulder flexion has a better probability of firing.
So how do you know what to adjust after that?
That's what I'm going to get to with her. So we can do a couple things. So functional neurology or chiropractic neurology, this is where we start incorporating some different stuff. So let's say it's Layla. Let's say I'm trying to do something for her shoulder. I can either adjust her shoulder or adjust her elbow or something like that. Or if I want something a little less stimulating, I can just give her a complex movement like this. The more complex it is, the more cerebellar it is. Okay? So I can also do that. If I want to do it, let's say she hurts. So pain's a big thing in our clinic apparently, right? Like it has to be pain or you can't treat them or something like that. I don't know what's up with that, but let's say Layla comes in with pain in abduction. Okay? So, and it's her left shoulder in abduction is where it hurts. So I want to come over and I can't move her shoulder. It hurts too much. I can take her opposite contralateral hip and I can say, okay, if she hurt in abduction, I'm going to put her in adduction and I can do complex movements over here. or I can adjust her with her hip in adduction. Does that make sense? This is hard to do when I can't adjust people at school. So it's like, just take my word for it. So I could activate an adductor, and then I could get her to hold that and adjust her. And that would help a cerebellar thing. You can also do the same thing. So if it's, let's say it's not a pain, I just want cerebellar stimulation, I can go in and I could do complex movements here while somebody's doing the same side. I don't want to like blow you out, sorry. Like have somebody do her leg at the same time. So as I'm going in, her leg's going out. So it'll look like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. You can do them like that if you're having trouble walking, or if you want to do same side stimulation, you can do same side stimulation. And it's just a different way to fire the same thing you would fire if you were adjusting them. Just dampened a little bit.
Make sure it's opposite. If it's like if you're doing on the same side, like you said, make sure if they're going in, they're going out on the same.
Can we do that with you? It's not going to mess you up, right? Nick, will you join me for a second? So let's say Layla's left cerebellum is, she needs to be adjusted on the left side, aka her cerebellum's not firing as much as it should on the left side. Okay? And Dr. Tom kind of showed us a little bit of this stuff last try. This is just more advanced of what he was showing us. So I'm going to grab her shoulder. Nick's going to watch me, or vice versa, whoever starts, but let's say he's watching me. If I go in, he's going to go out. And this is passive or active?
Passive.
Okay, so what would be more stimulation, passive or active?
Active.
So what we could do after that is we'll go ahead and stop, because I don't want to mess her up. But we could go in after that and say, okay, now do it active. And it would be even more. And then it's hard, right?
It's very hard.
Okay, so you don't have to do it. That's perfect. Thank you so much. So we're just looking at what cerebellum's firing higher. What's that?
When you say you want to stop, you want to mess her up, what do you mean?
So if Layla has happened to been in like 12 car accidents or whatever, you just don't have, let's say you've been in a concussion, or let's say you've got bad autonomics. And this is just a side note, if you guys don't have a pulse ox, you might have one on them. So let's say we were doing stuff with Layla, and you know that their autonomics are messed up. So you adjust them, and we'll get that going in a second. So basically, if you guys have never seen a pulse ox before, this will give you heart rate and oxygen saturation in their blood in every cell of their body. So it's pretty cool.
Don't confuse it with perfusion.
Perfusion is on some of them. I don't think mine has perfusion. Okay, so she's at 98% oxygen. Her heart rate is 69, 70, 71. So hers goes like this, right?
Pulse ox is great to measure heart rate variability as well.
So let's say I adjust her, and this happens all the time. Not with me, with some people. If you adjust them and their heart rate shoots up to 98 from 70 or 69, is that good or bad? Yeah. Probably not good. If you do something to them and it drops 10 points, is that good or bad? Depends on the patient. Right? So if you start doing a therapy with them, let's say their autonomics are really messed up. Let's say they come in and their circulation's really bad. They've got really cold or really red, really clammy or really sweaty hands and legs. And you start doing stuff and they immediately break out. They start sweating. Their feet and their hands turn red and their heart rate shoots up. You kind of exceeded their metabolic threshold, right? So this is a way while you're doing a treatment with them, whether it's physical therapy, whether it's chiropractic, whether it's ice, heat, whatever, you can monitor it because everybody's got a threshold. So you're going, and all of a sudden their heart rate either goes way, way up or way, way down. It's time to stop, right? Because you just exceeded their autonomics. So for Layla, what we would do, and when you were talking about what's too much for her, let's say she's had a concussion. Let's say she's had an injury. Let's say something's happened where I don't feel comfortable adjusting her, cervical manipulation. I'm going to start off doing a complex movement with that on there, and I'm just going to see what it does. And normally I would see it go 72, 68, 64, 63, 62, 62, 62, 64, 65, and then I'm done. Because as soon as it starts to go, then I'm like, all right, cool.
Also, too, you're feeling for stuff like rigidity. As rigidity comes out, then people start to get hypnotized or they dilate. other facial, is there facial flushing? You're looking for all signs of fatigue. So, but let's say, you know, she needs the opposite cerebellum stimulated. We haven't done an exam on her. So if we're doing the wrong cerebellum right now, that's why you're saying he doesn't want to jack her up, because, you know, we could be making something plastic we don't need to be doing.
It'd be the same thing as me adjusting her on the wrong side when she didn't need to be adjusted on the wrong side. It's going into the same part of her brain as it would as if I adjusted her, right? So just a thought. Nick was talking about rigidity too. Some people will get, if you start doing a complex movement on them, they'll start to get rigid. If you adjust them on that same side, they could be full-blown hypertonic and dystonic, and it's happened. Patients will come in after a chiropractic adjustment dystonic.
Or after just a mild fascial release.
Yeah.
It's too much of a slow stretch. Now, they feel better for a while.
Because you blew out their cortex.
And then now instead of the tightness here, it's tightness all the way into here. So you can jack people up.
And those people are in pain too. So people with dystonia, one of the doctors had it, and then she got some work done. She's a little bit better, but it started, I think, with her elbow, and then it moved to her shoulder, and then it moved into all her serratus and her, you know, it basically turned into like a one-sided thing. So I don't know why I'm telling you guys all this. I'm just saying there is such thing as blowing people out. I get kind of like ADD sometimes. You gotta reel me back in. But does that make sense? I went that a long way around to show you guys that this has a very intimate connection with this. So if you guys want to either boost or kind of dampen your adjustments midline, you guys can do stuff here, and it'll affect midline. They're not like completely different things. And you guys got to remember that too. If you guys affect peripheral nervous system, it's going to affect the central nervous system and vice versa, some way or another, okay? We were talking about like the activating systems the very first week, and I wanted to write them down for you. This is another question somebody had, is like, how does it work? How do your muscle spindles, how do adjusting you know, we talked about that in class. Parker's been asking every single one of our teachers, explain a subluxation. Like in the middle of the lecture, like no matter what they're talking about, like, what's chiropractic to you? And they're like, like he's asked what an MD, he's asked the physio teacher, and he's asked like one of the guest speakers in philosophy, and you just see him squirm, man. And it's like, you know, we're gonna be doctors, so like let's not squirm on that question. So if you're gonna talk about an activating system, about what it's doing to your brain, how it's evening out your cortex, how it's fixing you, you know, creating more of a communication in your nervous system, here's one. So the dentate, so where's the dentate at? That's the midline one. So this right here, dentate, goes up into the red nucleus, which is rubro, thalamus, cortex. So cerebellum, do an adjustment. Red nucleus, the red nucleus is when you see people walk and they don't have a shoulder arm swing, so they're like this. That red nucleus is bad, okay? So, and that's in the mesencephalon, that's the midbrain. If this is going way over your head, it's okay, we're gonna come back to it. So, red nucleus, so basically cerebellum, opposite side midbrain, up to the thalamus, into the cortex. If you want a more complicated one, this one is more realistic. This one is also an activating system. It goes from the dentate, the cerebellum, to the tegmentum, to the basal ganglia, so the striatum, frontal lobe, back down to the striatum, into a different part of the basal ganglia. It's the what's it called? When you combine them, the lenticulate nuclei. It doesn't matter. It's the putamen and the globus pallidus, which is basically in your basal ganglia. Back down, back to your thalamus, up to your cortex. So it's basically doing this on one side of your body all the time, and it's doing this on the other side of your body all the time. So as soon as you have a fixation, one slows down, and the other one's still going fast. I can't do like that, right? So one's going to be firing way, way, way higher than the other side. So that's when you can see different frequency of firing changes and stuff like that. Is anybody here for the first time? They're completely like, what the heck am I doing? Okay. It's like, I'm getting out of here. It's the last time I come to Neuro Club.
Hey, are you going to go back to the Ready, Set, Go at some point?
Yeah, let's do it right now. Come teach, Bryce.
Go ahead, do the slide first.
All right, so your cerebellum has 3 different functions. I want to get to the fun part. I'm not really feeling this today. For the cerebellum has 3 different functions. Let's say when you're doing let's say I want to pick up a ball and throw it. there's 3 different things that happen in the cerebellum. There's the feed forward. So your cortex is like, I want to throw the ball. It has to have communication with 2 different things, the cerebellum and basal ganglion first. The cerebellum, it kind of goes down, it's like, here's what I want to do, I don't really know how I'm going to do it. The cerebellum's like, okay, cool, I got you. So the cerebellum kind of comes up with a plan, and it's like, here's where I am, here's where I need to throw the ball, here's everything that's going on, here's my map of myself and everything that's going on around me. And then the brain's like, okay, cool, so here's what I'm thinking. So the brain sends down 2, it's the same plan, it's like the first draft of a paper. It's the same plan to 2 different things. It sends it down to the ventral horn cell of the actual muscles that are going to be involved, and the cerebellum. And then both of those things turn around and go back to the brain and go, I would tweak this, I would tweak this, I would do this a little bit differently. Okay, and the brain's like, okay, cool. So that's the set. The spinal cord sends a copy of whatever received to the cerebellum. So that's the same thing. So that's from the muscles. So now that you've got basically your first draft out without anything moving yet, then your brain, then everything goes up. That motor cortex fires down the muscles and actually does it. So a lot of people think the cerebellum has like motor tracks. And the cerebellum's like firing all these muscles, doing all these things. The cerebellum is just this loop that says, yes or no. Is this a good plan or a bad plan? Here's what we need to tweak. I mean, if everybody's seen that person behind a car, if a car's backing up, that person's going like, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Good, you're there, you can park the car. And that's kind of like your cerebellum. So as something's moving, so like let's say as I'm throwing it or as I'm doing something, that cerebellum is comparing the actual movement to the expected movement. And it's saying, you zigged when you should have zagged on that. Maybe you should do this. And that's why the more this happens, the better the movement you get. So what were you
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we talked about the ready, set, go, and how the cortex is what initiates that movement. Well, what happens after you start moving? Let's say you're just observing someone's gait. What happens when they start walking? You know, is every step they take, every muscle that's moving, is that coming from that motor cortex saying, okay, move this muscle here, move this muscle here? That seems really robotic. But actually, have anyone heard about like central pattern generators? Once you initiate the movement, like once you start walking, from here on, it's actually reflexive. Me walking is somewhat of a reflexive action, and it actually takes place at the level of the spinal cord. It doesn't have to go all the way back up to the motor cortex and say, hey, initiate that step, initiate this step, once you start the movement. I want to show a quick 20-second video.
Good luck getting there.
Basically, what this video is, just 20 seconds, and it's showing, I know you might not disagree with it using animals in research, but it's showing a cat on a treadmill. And it's a decerebrate cat. They literally cut the cat's spinal cord in half. There's no communication in the brain and the lower part of the spinal cord. They're holding the cat up by a string, and they're dragging its hind legs on the treadmill. And they're showing that just by dragging their legs, you'll see the cat start taking steps. And it actually shows it shows him walking. I'm not sure about the front legs, but watch the back legs. Again, there's no communication between the brain and the spinal cord here. This is all central pattern generated. And it's showing how there's different patterns and different movement types. So we're talking about, so this is one thing to talk about, but we're talking about cerebellum here. So what's happening? Can you pull up the webpage?
Yeah.
So once you start walking, once you start that gait, yes, my central pattern generators can be the ones reflexively keeping me walking, and I don't have to think about every step. I don't even have to use my brain for every step. But what is my brain doing? What my cerebellum is constantly monitoring those reflexes. It's taking in all the sensory information. So if I step and it's not what I expected, my cerebellum is what will fix that. So my cerebellum's not telling me every step to do, but it's literally taking in all that sensory information, all that afferent information.
So if you learn that pattern wrong, does it your cerebellum reinforce the wrong pattern?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like perfect practice.
Yep.
Well, you should never run on the elliptical machine in the gym with your hands on the handlebars.
Yep.
So
It's not working.
If you ever notice, it's
Yeah,
not cross crawl.
Yeah.
As your right leg goes forward, your right arm goes forward. And like you see people running on it all the time, and you point it out, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't even notice. But if you do that long enough, you reinforce the wrong pattern, and your body starts to change the proper patterns that you're supposed to know. It's one of the reasons we talk about crawling being so important for children.
Yeah.
Because it reinforces that early walking pattern. All of this stuff develops over time and allows you to become an upright human.
And to link this back with what we're talking about, functional disconnect syndrome, you've got these motor tracks going to the ipsilateral cerebellum and then going through the thalamus to the contralateral cortex. All of these motion, all of these movements, that's helping drive that hemisphericity to make sure you've got in sync with your left side of the brain and your right side of the brain. So that kind of ties it into what we were talking about with disconnect syndrome.
Much.
Yeah, that's all I got right now.
Okay. Hang up your way. And then Paul and Nick, if you guys ever, like, keep it coming. Because I had all these videos and internet stuff I was going to show, so now I'm just kind of like winging it. But basically, we spent a whole day on this in a couple weeks, the vestibular system, and you know, for the eyes and the vestibular system, a lot of chiropractors are like, that's the disconnect for them. It's like, I don't do that. I'm a chiropractor. I don't really care about the vestibular system. I don't care about vision. I don't care about any of that stuff. And here's why I care about that. Because you have the vestibulocerebellar pathways that have, for each cerebellum, when you adjust somebody, when it goes in that cerebellum, that part of the cerebellum, especially that midline cerebellum, is very, very much in communication with that vestibular nuclei. Right? Because if I'm spinning left, I need to engage muscles on the right to stabilize me. Those are the fastest pathways in the nervous system. And that's kind of important. You want those to be the fastest pathways in the nervous system, because as soon as you start leaning to the right, you need something to bring you back to the left, or you just tank. Right? So those are the muscles, those are the paraspinal muscles, and those are the extensors in your legs, that when they fire down to that, you don't fall over. So we're going to spend a whole day on that. It has a lot to do with the muscle tone in your neck and your trunk, and visual system and all that stuff. So we're going to get to that in a second. But you guys come to that one because it's going to explain a lot of this.
I wanted to say.
Go for it.
So, guys, the reason why it's important to know about the eyes and how it affects chiropractic is because if I'm here looking at Tyler and I decide just to look over at Layla, even if let's say I don't move my head, let's say I'm looking at him and look at Layla, even though I didn't move my head, the muscles in my paraspinals and in my neck and my back still fire like I am moving. So if I can't properly fixate or look at something, I'm going to get aberrant firing in my spine. You see what I'm saying? So if I can't look at you properly, or if I can't code the proper head-eye movement, then I'm going to get subluxations and all kinds of other stuff going on, and you don't really have a clue because you didn't learn anything about the eye. So that's where it comes back to giving a proper service to our patients, because cerebellum is highly involved with eyes, but it's highly involved with, midline structures, which that's what we're mostly affecting anyway. So just,
It's a random question. Let's say that's the case. Let's say you're not fixating properly, therefore that's causing the erector spinae to misfire, it's causing subluxations. What happens if you just treat the subluxations?
it's probably going to come back. Now, some people,
repeating.
Some people though, you got subluxations too. I know it's a little bit off topic.
No, hit it.
Subluxations are highly vestibular, highly basal ganglionic. So if you have, your vestibular system through cerebellum is firing bilaterally up and down your spine at the same time. So if you're perceiving a difference from one to the other, you're going to get what we call, dystonic posturing of midline structures, which is subluxation. So it's basically your body reacting to that difference in firing. So what can happen is sometimes that adjustment reconnects, brain and spatial awareness and goes, okay, I don't need to do that anymore. Other times though, because of that afferent aberrancy, you're going to get that subluxation pattern every time. No matter how, if you adjust somebody's C2 on the left 10 times and it's there on the 12 or 11, then you probably need to do something a little bit different.
Like
Here's
what?
the kicker too.
Like what? Like what would you do different?
Well, first, I'll tell you right now, it all starts with your proper exam. So did I check their cranial nerves? Did I check, the autonomic function? Did I listen to their heartbeat? Did I listen to their breath sounds? Sometimes guys, you need to do chest expansion. Sometimes you need to do spirometry. You need to put a pulse ox on to see if they're doing stuff like that. Because it's all going to give you your clinical window, your clinical cues of how do I need to manage this patient. Because it goes from a perspective right now as a younger trying to figure out how do I even spot dysfunction. But then it comes to a point where you start trying to manage a case and manage a patient, then you have to look at different things like, hey, what's their GI function? Are they breathing 60, how many times are they breathing per minute? What's their heart rate? All that stuff does, because your heart rate actually affects your spinal musculature. If you have arrhythmia, you're gonna have something going on with your spine too. I mean, it's crazy how it's all linked. But cerebellum, back to the kind of thing here is, you see the midline stuff there. It's midline eyes too. So don't forget that spine is linked to eyes very, very intimately. That's the point I really want to drive home just now. So.
I'm about to make people kind of squirm too. I would argue that not all subluxations are bad.
They're not. No.
And a lot of that, if you've got a vestibular lesion, so anything like, vertigo, BPP or BPPV, any of those things, if you've got a vestibular nuclei on one side that's firing faster, you're gonna get a subluxation in your neck. And it's gonna basically compensate for the fact that your vestibular system's messed up. And you're going to get hypertonic paraspinal muscle on the other side to basically help your brain out and say, okay, we're not spinning. It's basically going to tell your brain, okay, we're here. It's going to say, don't listen to vestibular nuclei, we are here in space, we are not spinning. So as soon as you adjust that out of them, they start spinning again, and they start losing where they are in space, and they get worse. So if you guys are out there and you guys start adjusting people and they come back and you're like, I was cool before I got adjusted and now I get dizzy, or I get POTS, or I get, all the different, anything where, if you're sitting and standing, you get dizzy or you start moving. Yeah, you're like, okay, maybe that one wasn't bad. Maybe I need to fix their vestibular system first, or if I don't know how to do that, I'll send them to a vestibular therapist, get that fixed, and then I'll adjust them.
I mean, it might be as simple as stuff like, hey, I want you to fixate on this dot while I move your head around. Or maybe I want you to look up and to the left while I adjust you or something. That's more complex with cerebellum, but you can really factor this stuff in great once you kind of know the pathways and know what can the patient handle. So do I want the patient to look up and to the left as I adjust them on this side? Do I want them to do a uniplanar versus a multiplanar movement while I adjust them? Do I want to, there's lots of cool things you can do with this stuff, guys. It's just, you gotta just get these basics down first, really.
So one of the things he was talking about up until left, one of the first things I do with people, they say like, yeah, like some people just get aches and pains. Like let's say it's like knee pain. They're like, yeah, it like hurts on my left knee when I walk, and it normally doesn't. I just woke up and it's, it started to hurt. In my head, that's like, I don't have enough muscular tone to support the knee joints. When you walk, you have bad mechanical loading. So one of the first things I'll do is I'll say, okay, I want to see if it's cerebellar. So I get them to look up, like let's say it's their left knee. I get them to look up and to the left, and I get complex movements on that side, or I'll adjust them on the left side, and then I'll say, okay, go walk again. And it's happened like 3 times this try where people are like, oh my God, it doesn't hurt anymore. And you're like, cool, it was cerebellum. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff where if you're dealing with like athletes or whatever, that's something like really fast that you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to try something. And it happened where it was a kid at school and he was like, I keep getting adjusted on the left and I need to be adjusted on the left. And I've been doing all these things. I've been going to all these people with all these different techniques and they all agree. It's like, this is where it is. I'm like, okay, we'll just add something to the adjustment. Look up and to the left if you're being adjusted to the left. If it's on the right, look up and to the right. Do some complex movements first. Try vibration on that side. Get more input. See if it works better, and it'll stay. What?
Try sound. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff.
So and a lot of times if you guys do see ankle pain, knee pain, hip pain, rule out the fact that there's not enough muscle tone supporting that joint. Because if it's being mechanically loaded the wrong way, you're going to sensitize pain fibers, right? So make sure you've got enough resting tone on it, and all that is cerebellum. So you're saying you could adjust C2 and affect their knee. I mean, it's just one of those things that the cerebellum's not firing high enough. That's something you could do to take care of that. But I always start out looking up. I start out easy first. I say look up to the left, do some complex stuff. If I need to, I'll do their leg too. And I'll say, okay, go walk. And if you fixed it, you're good. Let's do some fun stuff. Okay, I need a couple. All right, so everybody have a partner near them. We're about to do some stuff. We're done with the boring part. We're about to get real. All right, everybody partner up real fast, and you can just stand up around the room, whatever.
Okay, can I say something?
Yeah.
I got one more boring thing to say before we move on to the fun stuff.
Go ahead.
One of the studies is actually published by the Journal of Manipulative Physiology, it's like one of the journals that has the most positive research about chiropractic than probably any other journal. But in this study, they were tracking blood flow in the cerebellum after a C1, C2 adjustment. And yes, it wasn't the best setup study. They were adjusting everyone the same direction, so it was very, it wasn't based on what that patient needed. But what they found was they actually found a decrease. So when they did a supine C1, C2 left side adjustment, they actually found a decrease in blood flow on the lateral cerebellum on the left side. No change in blood flow in the other parts of the cerebellum. So you can read the study, you can look more into it if you want, I can answer your questions on it. But basically what I took out of it for this class is it is very specific whenever you deliver an adjustment. It's specific on what side it's affecting and as far as nerve activity and blood flow. So you need to make sure, you don't want to hurt someone, you want to help someone, you need to make sure you're adjusting on the right side. So I think after we do some posture analysis, we're going to do some setups and see if some of these neurological tests that we have to try to see what side is weakened matches up with what you feel and what you palpate.
And some of you guys are really good in other techniques. I want you guys to use that to either verify or not verify. Can you not verify something? Negatively verify? I want you guys to do your own technique. I don't care what it is, your analysis, actually not your technique because we can't adjust, but use your analysis, whatever you know, and then compare it with the stuff that we're about to do. And then see if it fits or doesn't fit. Okay? So going back to a patient, they come into your office, what would their posture look like? Huh? Somebody said it. Yeah, wide gait. So if you guys think of a baby. When you see a baby walk for the first time, a baby doesn't have a very good developed cerebellum, so they're like way out here, right? They're like, and they're trying to do their thing. It's a wide gait because they don't have that vestibulospinal tract, right? So they're way out here. So if you guys see a patient, even they don't have to look like this, but if you get them to march in place with their eyes closed, and as soon as they land, they've got 2 externally rotated feet, and then you count their, hold on. Oh, can you not hear me? And then you count their knuckles, right? So if they're sitting like, this is how you would be. And then I don't know if you guys can count my knuckles or not, but that's how I tell if shoulders are internally or externally rotated. Is if they're kind of like this, that could be cerebellum. And this stuff kind of gets tricky because if it's midline, let's say it's something midline on the left. We've only got one midline, right? So you're likely to see bilateral findings. Oh, they need to be adjusted on the left and the right. Okay, well, we need to look at midline stuff because this side is registering midline and this side is measuring midline. So you're looking for this, for posturing, this would be cerebellum. Just, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but external. If it's brainstem, here's your differential diagnosis. If it's pons medulla that's firing too low, you're going to see the same thing with your legs, but you're going to see internal rotation of the arm. So I know a lot of orthopedic chiropractors that will go in and they'll say, well, yeah, we can do, in the elbow, we can put it in external rotation and posterior, A to P, and adjust it. Great. We can go into the leg, we can go and adjust the hip. And I'm like, you're not adjusting orthopedically, you're trying to fix the pons. Does that make sense? So it just makes you know a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of like, okay, well, if I see this side could be normal, but then I see that. And I saw that at one of the seminars where I went to.
You're going to see that every day.
Huh?
You're going to see that every day.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that. But the guy came in, he was like, I just need, he was a doc that was showing his analysis, and he was like, who's messed up? And this girl's like, I'm super messed up, you can use me. And she went up there and like, she was like, and he actually did it. So he did the march, and she was like, boom. And he was like, perfect, that's it. Internally, he took it orthopedically by joint. And he's like, I'm going to adjust this, I'm going to adjust this, and adjust this, and adjust this, and this. And I was like, man, he's not looking at like if you're going to change a business or a company, you don't start out with the janitor. You talk to the CEO, right? You want to talk with like what's controlling everything. Because you can deal with the janitor if you want to, but like you still got to like, I'm getting weird. All right, but y'all get my point, right? Affect the thing that's going to affect everything that's wrong with it. Just don't start with one wrong thing at a time. It'll save you a lot of time. So cerebellum, external rotation, you're going to see everything in external rotation. Head position, if you can see, you'll see a lot of people, and she's gone. I was going to use her as an example, but you'll see a lot of people who don't know where they are in space. So if you get them to sit down And you can be like, okay, sit straight ahead, and they're like, and you're like, sit straight ahead, and they're like, get mad at you. They're like, I am sitting straight ahead. And you're like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, that is a cerebellar on that side. So if you see rotation or you see a head tilt to the left, I would normally look for a left cerebellum thing. You can also see it in sway. So actually, we already doing that one. So Nick, can I borrow you real quick? You're not messed up, right? So if I got him to stand with his feet together,
Didn't answer.
and stand up nice and straight, and then close your eyes, and saw him sway. All right. So do you sway into or away from a cerebellar deficit?
Into.
That's going to be into a right cerebellar deficit. You're going to have decreased muscle tone on this side. You're going to have increased muscle tone on this side. His brain's going to be like, hey, we're moving this way when really not, so he's got to get a compensatory response this way.
So it's not opposite? Like it's in the tier that these are the ones that are...
It's, the majority of the time, it's this way, but it's something to look at because it's not 100%. So you have to look at that and be like, okay, it could be vestibular, it could be cerebellar, it could be muscle tone, it could be pain. Maybe he just hurts on that side and he's getting off of it. You know, it could be a bunch of different things, but it's something to look at. If I see somebody that's swaying and I'm like, that's something I need to check out because I don't want to adjust them on the wrong side. I could also do, so keep your eyes closed. I'm going to use my forearm and I'm going to knock you to one side or the other. You cool with that? You got to warn people before you just whack them. They get mad at you. So you want to make sure if I knock him on this side, he's got enough muscle tone to come back. Some people can't. And you see like one of these and you're like, I didn't hit you that hard, right? So you do it to the other side. And it's just with a forearm. You're not like tackling him or whatever. It's just enough to knock him off, making sure his feet are together and his eyes are closed. And you're making sure he has enough muscle tone to come back. Another way. So if you see one way more than the other, something to look at, right? So that was, the sway test was first, then perturbation like that. What's really cool too, if there's a bunch of like foam pads running around. I know in the adjusting room, there's like those pillows. You can get them to stand on those, which decreases your proprioception in your brain. So you're relying a lot more on vestibular function, your vision. So you can kind of rule stuff out. So you can kind of go in and say, okay, I'm going to stand on this thing, and then do or I'm going to stand on the ground and do all my tests. So I'm going to do a sway test, eyes open, eyes closed, and I'm going to get them to stand on that pillow, which kind of takes away your proprioception, and then close their eyes. And then if they tank, you're like, okay, proprioception's gone, vestibular input's gone, or vision's gone. Now it could be vestibular. Right.
Can you give a quick example of what that test would show if it was vestibular, or if it was cerebellum?
Yeah. So let's say for him right now he's on the ground. Mm-hmm. Okay. You look at him normally first, and you say, okay, so eyes open first, and he's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then we say, okay, so what is he using? Let's say right now he's using three things. He's using vision to figure out if he's leaning a certain way. He's using proprioception and vestibular. If he does go a certain way, he'll feel it and he'll come back, right? Mm-hmm. So we can take away vision, and now he's dealing with two different things, vestibular and proprioception. Mm-hmm. So now the only thing left to take out is proprioception, so I want to put him on a pad or something that doesn't give him a stable ground. And so now he's working solely off vestibular, and that's when you normally see a lot of people do this kind of stuff, which isn't good, because then when you adjust them, that could either make them better or worse, but if you're adjusting them when they have a vestibular issue and not a proprioceptive issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, when you're saying proprioceptive, he's talking about cerebellum quite a bit, so remember that.
Yeah. Bryce, what you got on? Oh, you already talked about that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so eyes. So if I'm going to check vestibular, and you guys are going to do all this stuff in a second. How much time we have? Yeah, I'm going to be done in like 2 minutes. Okay, so you guys are going to check eyes. So Nick, can I borrow you one more time?
Yeah.
There's these oblique eye movements that I can use to check his cerebellum out. And if I'm checking out his left cerebellum, I'm going to start off going up and to the left. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Yeah, I can't do this.
You don't want to do it? Well, you want to show them? Is it going to mess you up if we do it?
No. It's not going to mess me up.
Hey, y'all get close. Promise?
Yeah.
Okay.
It won't mess me up. It'll help.
Okay.
See,
is it better to do it?
but mine's not cerebellum though. Mine's an issue with my lateral my abducens.
Okay.
So it doesn't. This eye doesn't abduct very well.
Okay.
So that's what you're gonna see.
Okay. Can everybody kind of see?
Hey, take a step that way, man. There you go. Get
Out of the light. Okay, y'all watch his eyes. Here's the deal. So if you're watching his eyes, stare right here, because you're going to be able to pick up movement outside of where you foveate. So your foveate's where all your detail is. Outside of that foveate is where you see speed, right? So you don't see like animals coming in and like eating you and stuff. Okay, so watch his eyes. Ready? Okay, relax. See that? Thanks, Nick. So you should see, if you've got a good cerebellum, you should see one side. I mean, it shouldn't be hard for you to just look at something that's smooth and look back down, right? And then you can go back to midline. That's the cerebellar test for the right side. Up and to the right is the right cerebellum. If you look at up to the left, down to the right, and then back to midline, that's left cerebellum. So if you see shaky, 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 right? That's not smooth. So I would say, okay, we're going to look at this side. We're going to maybe look to adjust you on that side. It's a really, really quick way to evaluate somebody, just like gait. You know, you can say, okay, I would look at this side. So somebody asked me last time, we did a sway test, what happens if they go back and forth? That's not to the left and right. That's a bilateral weakness. So it could be midline. So now if you're talking about bilateral, you could be talking about fastigium, because the fastigium on both sides are going to affect midline. Or the midline could affect both fastigium.
There's a lot of frontal mechanisms too with A to P sway.
So you guys are going to check that on everybody, cool? So if you go left cerebellum, you go up into what way? Left, cool. You could also do a DDK. So y'all just hang out and then we'll do it to Nick. Alright, so 2 different DDKs. There's this one and then there's that one. They affect 2 different things. So we've done this one before. So go out first.
What's the difference between those two just biomechanically?
What do you guys think that we're here? So show them what the first one looks like. Is that one? What's the other one? So what's the difference?
Less muscles involved.
Okay, so which
Different
muscles are
muscles.
involved on the first one? Shoulder, internal, external rotation. The other one? And that's more supination, pronation, right? So if you do supination, pronation, if you guys remember those 4 deep nuclei, so medial and then the lateral one over here, the very lateral one is more spatial orientation. This one's more midline. And it's really easy to remember because the most medial controls the most medial on you. The most lateral controls the most lateral on you. So this one is midline. Then it's shoulders and hips. Then it's elbows, knees, feet and ankle. Spatial. So your surroundings. Okay? So if you're doing this, it's going to affect your shoulders, right? So it would be your emboliform. No, false, globus, my bad. If you do a test here, it's emboliform. Does that make sense? So you're basically narrowing down which one is not firing right. Okay, does that make sense to everybody?
Would it also include the spatial one too?
Yes.
I mean, you're doing 2 at once, right?
Yeah. So that one, and that's a feed-forward mechanism. That one fires a lot in a feed-forward mechanism, but this is just giving you an idea. So this is when I will go in and I immediately palpate one of these things to figure out, okay, can I adjust this? Do I need to look at something else? Do I need to make sure it's not his leg 2 and I'm looking at some global thing? So it's just giving you an idea. One side, as soon as you see, and he'll do both of them, as soon as you see one side smooth and one side start to open up and wave at you, that's a positive finding. It should be smooth.
From what I know so far, it's like... Go ahead.
Okay? That one started to open up, but it was still okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bryce. Good.
Even though this might be looking at a couple different things, it is looking at cerebellar function. That's one of the things it's looking at. So if you see a sign here, you might want to do a couple other tests and try to narrow that down to, oh, this is a cerebellar problem he has going on here.
And the other thing, too, is you're looking at the same parts of the brain when you adjust that are affected by vibration, by stereognosis. So if I give him, well, we didn't do that. We can do graphesthesia too. So if I go back to, yeah. So if I go back to right here, where these nerve pathways are coming in, how can I make these people better? So let's do graphesthesia real quick. Both hands out. Let's say what letter is, or what number am I drawing on you?
4.
That was my bad. That was really bad. I need to get fixed, people. All right, so that's graphesthesia. There's stereognesia or stereognosis, whatever it is, when you hand them, say, what is that? What is this? It's a little clicker thing. So it can be shapes, it can be textures, it can be stuff like that. Anything that you use as a diagnostic tool, you can also use as a therapy. So if they're not good at figuring out shapes or textures, that can be a part of therapy when they come in, when you adjust them, see if it gets better. So they come in, they suck at it, I adjust you, hey, what is this? Boom, that's blah, 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 blah. Cool, we're on the right track. Right? I know where I am in space more, I can control my body better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So if you're doing graphesthesia, for instance, what part of the brain are you kind of checking more than the other?
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys know?
Far out.
Somebody knows.
Yes.
Tyler knows. Paul knows. Somebody. Layla.
Parietal.
Sensory?
Parietal.
Yeah.
Parietal.
Yeah.
So you've got everything in everything in the front past, what is this line called, the separating line?
Central gyrus.
Okay? So you've got a precentral and a postcentral gyrus, right? So that little like squiggly lobe that's right in front of the central gyrus is your motor strip. Everything right behind your central gyrus is your sensory strip. So you're testing your sensory strip through the back of your spinal cord. Okay? So we've got the DDK, so you can do the same thing. So we just did the arm one, right? So
You can
we're
do it seated too, guys. You
right.
don't have to have them stand up.
So we only tested this part right here. What's firing up through here. Now we need to affect, sorry, my bad, right here. The lateral part. Now we need to affect the legs. So you can go down and do the legs too. So have a seat. And let's do a foot tap. So keep a steady beat on one foot. As fast as you can. Okay, other foot. Okay. If people aren't, thanks. You'll see either a hesitation or one side, just like your hands. You can see. Give them like a bad one. Yep, exactly. And you guys got to kind of imagine this because we're all relatively healthy here, right? If we're succeeding in graduate school and doctorate school, none of us are going to have really bad brains. Some of us do, and they're still okay. But you got to think about the general public, and the general public aren't as healthy as us, right? So, again, go back and find, everyday people that aren't in grad school because you're really going to see stuff that comes out, and it's actually a lot more common than you think. And a lot of people think they're normal until you start doing stuff like this, and then you're like, whoa. We had a lot of people from last try learn this stuff, and they would go home on the break with their family, and they would fix them. They're like, I only know these, I don't know a whole lot, but I know 4 tests, and I know these are some things I could do to make it better, and it'd be better. And they're like, try once, you know what I mean? So like it's just quick, simple stuff.
You can have them play piano too.
Yep. Can we do heel shin real quick?
Yeah,
So he's gonna go face up.
Jason, so if you find something going on with any of those, you're automatically going to get cerebellum, like you said. But then, how do you know then what to adjust?
In my head, the most simplistic way I know how to do it is if I do a palpation, whatever I do, and then I never just say, boom, that's hypertonic and adjust it. I'll feel them and I'll say, okay, this is where I want to adjust. It's like call my name. And like for us, when we're at the beginning of this, you get like crack addicty, right? You're like, ooh, yeah, like it's out. I'm gonna hit it, boom, and then you have to like slow down and be like, okay, is this really what their whole nervous system needs, or is this a compensation for something else? So I want to adjust Nick on the left. I want to do some other cerebellar tests to make sure that if he does have a subluxation on the left, he's gonna have findings. Does that make sense? It's either going to be a visual finding or something isn't going to be right when I do an exam on him. So I just want to prove myself wrong. I want to go in and say, okay, here's what I think it is. Let me do everything I can to prove myself wrong. And if at the end of my entire exam I don't prove myself wrong, I adjust it.
And like you're saying, possibly you won't even have to adjust them if you do enough tests to get like enough stimulation.
True. It happens a lot.
But I'm saying, my question was more like you adjust on the left side, but how do you know if it's C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, That
was from the original palpation.
Okay, so you just felt the subluxation, you felt where it
yeah.
lay out, and then...
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times people come in, like for us, it's just like, you know, we come in to each other in class and we're like, find it. You know what I mean? But for them, people come in and they'll tell you, they're like, you know, this is why I'm here. And then you do an exam and then you want to rule out whatever you think it is. So you don't go into an exam trying to prove yourself right. That's where you get in trouble. You go, here's what I think it is based on my best educated guess. Let me prove myself wrong. And then do differential diagnosis, boom, 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 boom. And then at the end of all of that, you know everything that you've done to your knowledge that like, okay, cool, then you're good. So for Nick, so this one, and then we did the pinch test. You know, you guys have seen that one before. So if it's like kind of small and like twitchy versus like boom, 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 this side's kind of not good, right? So that's the same side cerebellum. Cool thing about the cerebellum is a lot of the same tests we're doing is all the same side. We don't have to worry about crossing over. It's not cortical. So it's the same side of a lot of this stuff is the same side you would be adjusting on wherever. So if we're doing, we already assessed his hands look pretty good. Now we're going to do lower extremity. So we're going to take, Nick, can I get you to take this heel, put it on this knee, slide it all the way down your shin, off the tip of your toe. Not sexy. Right? Other side. Sexy. Right? Do the other side. He's showing you what you would see. You're either going to see the number one sign where you wake up and you throw a red flag is if he overshoots his knee. So if he's going to overshoot it or if he turns like that, not sexy, right? So I'm like, and then you can start looking at adjusting his ankle. You can either do like a supination or a pronation protocol. You can look at his knee. You can look at internal external rotation. Assuming that it's now like if this messes up, then I'm looking at this shoulder. I'm making sure that this shoulder is good before I adjust that foot, right?
Is the overshooting of the knee kind of like the same thing when you're looking at the eyes because the cerebellum will catches it? So if you have overshooting in eye movements, that shows the cerebellum.
So that's the next test. So go ahead and sit up for me, Nick.
Sorry.
Okay, so here's the next test that I do with eyes, and this is because keep in mind whatever's going on in the eyes is going on in the spine if you know how to look for it, right? So if I say, you know, if I'm getting Nick to look at me in the nose, I say, sorry, I'm like, yeah,
I'm on video here.
I know. So let's say he's looking at me, and I say, okay, look whatever thumb I do this to, look at. So boom, back, here, back. Okay, so I want you guys to imagine if I'm looking to the left. If I'm going to the left, this frontal lobe, my right frontal lobe, has to slap my eyes over here. My cerebellum catches it. And it says, enough, you've gone where you need to go, stop. So pitcher, catcher, okay? If your cerebellum's not strong enough to stop your eyes, you're going to see hypermetric movement. So you're going to see an overshoot. If I'm looking right here, you can see people's eyes go boop, boop. If the cerebellum's too strong or the cortex isn't firing enough, you're going to see the eyes go whoop, whoop. Right? So you've got one of two options. Let's say it's hypometric. You're going to say the cerebellum's too strong. It's like the catcher scooting up on the plate so the ball doesn't have to go as far. You're going to see the cerebellum being too strong where it goes like this. Or you're going to see the cortex on the opposite side not firing enough. And you're going to see that. If you see hypermetric, the cerebellum's either going to be weak or the cortex is going to be too strong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of. Did that confuse some people? Are you good? Good? Raise your hand. If you're not good, we go back over it. Okay. So check their eyes too. Just say, look at my nose, look at my thumb. And then back. And look at my thumb. Back. And then you'll see their eyes go or if they stick it, it's good. That just gives you guys another tool. So it's a really fast tool. If you don't have a lot of space, if you guys don't have something, it's like the more tools you have to kind of look at people, the better. If you want more tools to like rule yourself out or rule yourself in, and you'll see it line up. So
kind of going back to the neural pathways, you know, that we talked about the cerebellum having that sensory input back into the brain from the movement. So that kind of makes sense, you know. If there's a problem in getting that sensory information back up to the brain, you're going to overshoot that before you say, oh, wait, that's where I was supposed to be right there. Does that make sense?
And the last one, before I get you guys to do this, you guys are gonna have 10 minutes to do it. But the last one I want you guys to do is, if it's a basal ganglionic issue, you can normally have a resting tremor. Whereas if it's and here's your differential diagnosis between the two. Basal ganglionic is resting tremor, like Parkinson's, 4 to 6 hertz. Whereas if you see a cerebellum issue, you could see the tremor during movement, and it's 8 to 12 hertz, so it's a little bit faster. So if you say, I want you to touch your nose and then touch my finger and then back to your nose, so they're doing this, you're going to see, right? If you guys are driving a boat out in the middle of the lake, it's easy. But if you're parking the boat where you need somebody to tell you, like, okay, back up, move over, do this, it's a lot harder. So at the very end of a movement is when you see a and then back. So you guys can just do this, right? And then do the other side. So whatever side's shaky, that gives you a pretty good cerebellar finding too. If you're an alcoholic, you have both sides are bad.
Let's say they look pretty good, but you still want to. I'm telling you, man, I've seen this 100 times. Patients, man, they're almost showing you nothing in the exam. None of that kind of stuff. You're doing finger to nose, it looks great, everything's looking good. And then you have them do this. You have them close their eyes and tell them to put their fingertips together like this, right? But what you'll see is, I'm telling you, and they'll look healthy. Everything else, you have them come do this, and it'll be.
Try it. All right, I'll figure out how to put this back up, and y'all go do all that stuff. So evaluate first their posture and their balance, and then do their cerebellar test. Figure it out.
So because most of you guys are probably pretty good about palpating already, for today, for practice, let's do these tests first, and then check it with your palpation, not vice versa.
I'm the wrong guy to show eyes to.
What are you trying to make? Watch this.
I
got a problem. Slipping.
So if you see it like this, where the fingers are
So
not
ask them what they would do with that, you know? Don't ask me, ask them. They're the clinics.
What are we testing?
Find where you're going to do it.
So go ahead and close your eyes. So close your eyes, march in place, and nod your head 10 times. Okay, so now straight ahead. What do you guys see with his feet? Okay, how many knuckles do you see? What side? Cerebellum is this. A little bit more on that side, right? Okay, so for him, he's got internal, external. So his could be more on this side. Would you agree? Okay, so we wanna look on that axis so far. So really, he hasn't told us anything yet. He's just giving me an idea of like what do I kind of want to look at. Okay, so kind of get your fingers go like this. So just one at a time. So that's another thing is you want to see how well people can listen to your instructions. You kind of want to have a standardized, whatever you say needs to be standardized because you want to see how different patients react to it. If they're like, wait, say that again, you're like, cortical. You know what I mean? They're not thinking like, some people like, even if you tweak them, like for him, it's like, no, just one. He's like, cool. But if people are like, oh, wait, you want, and they start like moving and you're like, okay, you're not firing. Right. Does that make sense? Yeah. So one hand up. Touch your index finger to your thumb. Open back up as fast as you can sometimes. Okay, good. Did you guys see anything else? So you look at that. You also want to look and see if he's doing anything else. It could bleed over his hand. So while he's doing this, you can see like a twitch over here, which he should be able to inhibit. That's a sign. Or he could blink a lot, or he could squeeze his face. You never do something that's like really hard. You see people focus and they're like, no, you want to see how much it's taxing his system.
Is that like just trying to compensate for this, low impaired function?
RF. Okay. Could be.
It's weird. The first time I saw someone in their other hand doing it, it was like, that looks fine, but wait, did you see the other hand? He's using that hand to drive.
I'm going to tell you guys this too. So I'll kind of, because I know you guys weren't all there when I was starting. So the PMRF, that's what I said it could be with internal external rotation. That's his pons and medulla on this side. Guess what fires into that? The cerebellum on this side. So even if I say, okay, the pons and medulla aren't firing enough, I've got two options. Either the cerebellum is firing into it enough and the pons and medulla sucks, or the cerebellum's not firing enough, and the pons medulla is just fine, it's just not being fired to enough. So I want to differentiate that, and we're going to do that next week, is the pons and medulla. So for him, it could be pons medulla signs because the cerebellum's not
Go ahead and bend your elbow. No, I'm going to do it again. That's okay.
You are. We're diagnosing
It's going to help you find
okay,
out
so let's
your
do
cerebellum.
one
Go ahead
session.
and turn your pons over and up really fast.
Faster.
So we're already determining that it's both the medial lobe and then the little lateral. So now go ahead and keep your arms bent.
That's the thing.
Finger piano playing.
Try to count in your head, or I'll sit there and I won't show them.
Okay, so that's not as bad. That's not as coordinated. So we've determined which lobes of the cerebellum we're going to focus on. And then just on that side, we adjust into lateral cerebellum. And then that's also going to be and then grab
Or you'll start incorporating other hands. Okay, so I want you to go like this.
We could functionally rehab.
So now it'd be interesting if one of you guys wants to palpate his neck and see if he has any subluxations that you can find.
Would it be on the right?
I don't know. You tell us.
Well, no, but I mean, typically that's close.
Did you have a sign-in sheet? I actually did not pass one out today, but next week for sure. Yes.
So you're looking for speed there, make sure it matches, but then you also talked about them opening up and starting to wave it. Is that where it's starting to go more like this instead of this? It's more like, okay.
That's a compensatory movement. Is it? Well, there you go.
Oh, my friend. It was a cat, actually.
Yeah, so you got your tendons running over each other. Or something, or a muscle. So, go in and that's there you go, right there. So it could be. And then we want to do, put down on the pressure down on the throat. Always be there to make sure.